Welcome to the second of our community-facing webinars aimed at the general public. And my name is Moira Junger. I'm the proud CEO of the Sleep Health Foundation, coming to you from Wurundjeri country, which is the land of the people of the Kulin Nation here in inner Melbourne. And we pay our respects to the traditional owners of all the lands in which we're meeting across the nation this evening, and welcome any First Nations people on the webinar tonight. We also pay tribute to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's understanding of health, which is a very holistic view, and we at the Sleep Health Foundation draw inspiration from it. Aboriginal health does not mean the physical well-being of an individual, but refers to the social, emotional and cultural well-being of the whole community. For Aboriginal people, this is seen in terms of the whole life view, and it includes broad issues like social justice, equity, respect, responsibility, rights, as well as traditional knowledge, traditional healing and connection to country. So you can see why we get lots of inspiration from that. We plan to run these webinars every month as an education and awareness tool for the general public on a range of topics. So the Sleep Health Foundation was formed in 2009 and has its mission, vision and objectives focused on improving the health, wellbeing, performance, productivity of all Australians via better sleep. We also aim to provide strong advocacy to help meet the sleep needs of the whole community, as well as people with sleep disorders. Our Consumer Reference Council was formed late last year and is comprised of 9 people from across Australia who are living with or supporting someone with a sleep disorder. 3 of those 9 are joining us for the panel discussion this evening. The purpose of the Consumer Reference Council is to provide input and guidance for all Sleep Health Foundation activities, including advocacy, education, partnerships and research activities from a consumer perspective. Also to facilitate consumer representation in the development and design of research grant proposals, to align research objectives with the areas of importance to consumers. This is the least that's expected of research funders. Having the consumer voice shaping all that we do, even information geared towards the general population and not sleep disorders, is expected, and so it should be by governments and funders at all levels. So now the most important part, which is introduce Suzanne, Charlotte and Carol Ann, which is our very important panel discussion tonight. I'll introduce each of them. First to Suzanne Curyer. Suzanne was diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea in 2016 after many years of experience and symptoms and significant impact on her quality of sleep and life. Fortunately, she participated in the National Trial for Surgery to manage her OSA, and the result was life-changing. She also has severe restless leg syndrome, and these 2 sleep disorders have impacted Suzanne's quality of life. I'd next like to introduce you to Charlotte Vincent. And Charlotte is a sufferer of idiopathic hypersomnia. After years of struggling with no answers and just believing that she was lazy and a bit of a failure, she was fortunate enough to be referred to a specialist sleep physician in Melbourne in 2014, age 33. Diagnosis was a shock, but it meant a huge amount to know that her struggle was real and there were people out there who knew about it and were happy to help. And also we have Carol Ann Howlett, and Carol Ann has late onset narcolepsy, experiencing symptoms at the age of 50. Once formally diagnosed, symptoms had progressed to unmanageable levels and she had to give up her corporate career. Now at 56 and medicated, she runs her own psychotherapy practice and has identified an incredible 14 clients within the last 4 years as needing further sleep investigations. We also were expecting another one of our Consumer Reference Council members, Mr. Ralph Sadler, and just a brief word. Ralph isn't able to make it tonight, and he prepared a statement he sent by email that he's really happy for me to read out. I'll just tell you a little bit about Ralph first. Ralph has over 40 years experience with insomnia, sleep apnea and disruptive sleep patterns. His sleep problems were exacerbated by complex PTSD arising from his military service since the late 1980s. And a more recent diagnosis of bipolar affective disorder. Both illnesses require good sleep quality as a foundation for successful long-term therapy, and he continues to struggle with getting the quality of sleep he needs to recover. And Ralph has sent me a note. He apologises, he would have really liked to have been part of the panel tonight, but it's a sort of a sober reminder of the struggle of sleep disorders and the bidirectional relationship with mental health as well. Ralph, this is a statement from Ralph. Ralph was currently in hospital after a relapse in his mental illnesses, requiring a short hospital stay whilst his medication is adjusted and his mood stabilised. Sleep disruption was a symptom and may have contributed to this episode. His time in the clinic will enable supervised adjustments to stabilise his mood and antidepressant medication, combined with group and individual therapies. Good sleep is an essential part of this treatment to reset his mental health, and this is best obtained in a supervised, secure hospital facility. So I really am so grateful to the three women who are joining us tonight. And I've got 3 simple questions, well, not with simple answers, I'm sure. And I'll just ask the questions as we go. And then within about half an hour or even less, we'll open it up to Q&A from all of you in the audience as well. So I've got a first question that I'll ask first to Suzanne, and then to Charlotte, and then to Carol Ann. And I'll ask Suzanne first. Please tell us a bit about yourself, in particular your sleep disorder, as a lot of people tuning in will be unfamiliar with the signs and symptoms. So over to you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Moira. So I'm in my early 50s and have enjoyed a career in the Australian public service and as a senior executive in the not-for-profit sector, so very busy roles. I typically enjoy spending time with friends and family and my pets. I have a love of watching late night movies and reading, and love to cook and entertain. So that's my lifestyle. Since the time I was little, I have always found it difficult to get to sleep and stay asleep. My mother recounts that to me. Generally, I used to just think that I was the typical night owl, surviving on little sleep when I was younger. But then I started to notice the impacts of this as I got older. So as Moira said, I experienced severe restless leg syndrome and obstructive sleep apnea. With my restless leg syndrome, it's a long-term disorder that has caused me a very strong urge to move my legs, particularly when I lay down at night to go to sleep. If I don't move, particularly my right leg, it feels very uncomfortable. It's a difficult sensation to describe, but I call it an insidious crawling feeling just under my skin in my lower legs, ankles and feet that can't be relieved. So mine can be described, as I said, as early onset. So that usually begins before the age of 45 and worsens over time. And I can't remember a time that I haven't had severe restless leg syndrome. My other significant sleep disorder is obstructive sleep apnea. The initial signs were I started to snore. People would make comments about it, my family, when I went to visit them. I'd always wake up with a very sore, raw throat from the snoring. I'd wake during the night to go to the bathroom because of the impact of my breathing stopping a lot during the night and the impact that had on my renal system. I was finding it very difficult to wake up and get out of bed, always feeling tired and having to use the weekend to catch up on sleep rather than do the other normal activities I liked doing. So, and that impacts on socialising, keeping up the household chores, study and all the other things that keep us busy. Other signs of this were really strong sugar cravings throughout the day because I had really low energy levels. So, of course, I put on a significant amount of weight, was too tired to exercise, was finding it hard to concentrate, falling asleep in the middle of the day if I was watching television or reading a book. And what really I noticed as well was I started to find it difficult to concentrate, and my memory recall became challenging, which shocked me. So overall, both conditions have taken a toll on the quality of my life and relationships because I was always tired. And many people, including myself, just fobbed this tiredness off as having a very busy life with lots of work and travel. So they're the main signs and symptoms of my 2 sleep disorders.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Suzanne. Charlotte, can you tell us about the signs and symptoms and of idiopathic hypersomnia? I mean, it's a mouthful, and most people haven't heard of it, I guess, and most people listening in the general public wouldn't have heard of it. Tell us your experience.
I had definitely never heard of it until I was diagnosed. Yeah, I was born and brought up in England, moved to Australia when I was 30. I'm now 41. And I think I've had the symptoms of this condition for as long as I can remember, certainly since probably about 11. For me, it really was about the need to sleep excessively. So 14 hours would be okay.
From what age? How old were you, Charlotte, when you were sleeping in 14 hours?
If I was able to, probably from any age, getting up to go to school was very difficult. My poor mother. And so the other kind of main symptoms then are being tired when awake, and just wanting to go back to sleep or have a nap or lay down. Finding it extremely difficult to wake from sleep. And it has had a detrimental impact on many facets throughout my entire life. So, be it friends, studies, career, relationships, any sort of kind of free time, leisure time, as Suzanne said, trying to keep up with the weekly chores and things. Yes. Made it very, very difficult.
So you were 33, it took till 33 to know what it was.
That's right. Yeah. Up until then, I just didn't like going out of bed and feel like it.
Yeah. Right. And we'll get to, I'm sure, with the other questions, but it sounds like at the moment you're medicated.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, diagnosis and treatment made a huge difference.
Yeah, I'll get to that. All right, thanks. Anything else you want to add about I think we've got a pretty quick picture of how this excessive daytime sleepiness and not being able to wake as well, and impacting on all every aspect really.
Yeah, running late for everything.
Running. Yeah, I bet. Thank you so much, Charlotte. Carol Ann,
Hi.
a lot of people listening, watching might not know about narcolepsy. They've heard about it. Can you tell us your experience and what the signs and symptoms have been that prompted you to even think about getting some?
Certainly can tell you about it. As you mentioned, I didn't actually start getting symptoms until I was about 50, and it was very, very slow progressing. I hadn't actually realized. Well, I just thought I wasn't getting enough sleep. I was overdoing it. I mean, it was a stressful job and all of that kind of stuff. But as the months progressed, it was getting more and more obvious that I actually couldn't keep awake during the day. Couldn't figure it out. I would be in the middle of meetings and I would have terrible sleep attacks, micro sleeps, and I wouldn't remember what the previous sentence was said or spoken in the room. Somebody would ask me a question, I wouldn't remember the question, and it would only happen a second ago. So it was really very confusing, not understanding what it was. It also, and that still actually does happen. Even on the medications, the memory, because of the lack of sleep, the memory of course is also affected, and so obviously with narcolepsy, the sleep-wake cycle is all bundled up. It doesn't know when to stay asleep and when to stay awake, so it happens in inopportune moments. But I also actually get a lot of insomnia as a result, which is part and parcel of it. And very like Suzanne, I get the sugar cravings 24/7. In terms of a social life, it's impossible to actually have one. I find having had some sleep, I'm okay in the mornings. I have a short window where I can work to a good capacity, never quite to the standard that I had been working prior to the onset. And then from probably about mid 11 o'clock, I would say it's just downhill all the way to the point where I can't cook anymore because it's just too dangerous for me. And it's a bit of a family joke, really, you know, about the silly things that I end up doing. Driving, of course, was always, I was always really worried in case I wasn't being able to drive. But, you know, with certain kinds of medical testing, I can. The really oddest thing, it's very emotively driven. I might get sleep attacks like mad. When I'm going around doing the food shopping, for example, that's a massive trigger for me for some reason. I guess I also have restless leg as well, like Suzanne. So, yeah.
Do you have cataplexy as part
Yeah.
of your narcolepsy?
I knew I forgot something. Yeah, I have cataplexy as well.
Can you explain what that is for you?
Yeah, so mine, thankfully, oh my goodness, thankfully, it's only mild. I have met people who have very severe cataplexy. I don't know how they manage it. It's a loss of muscle tone in your body, and it tends to be spurred. An attack comes on when people say laughing, but for me, it's not when I'm laughing. It's like if I get a shock, or I suddenly get really anxious, and my legs buckle. So from the knee downwards, I lose the ability to hold myself up, and there's no control over it. And I'm literally hanging on to whatever's next to me and trying to keep myself upright. But it's nowhere near as severe as some.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for talking about those symptoms, because cataplexy, and you know, people often in movies and things, it's sort of almost a bit of a joke, isn't it? Narcolepsy, falling asleep, it's like sleep attacks, or cataplexy, like dropping to the ground. And certainly, I'm sure my next question, thank you so much for explaining all of the symptoms to our audience. And our next question, really, I'll start again with Suzanne. I really want to know with all of you, really, what the road to diagnosis has been, like sort of, you know, how many years, how many different appointments, how many different specialists. Obviously, it's really hard to give it in just a few minutes, but I think that's just really what we want for the general public to know. You know, just starting with, I guess how old you were. I mean, some of you said it in your introductions a bit, it's sort of been lifelong, but really when you started the journey to diagnosis, it'd be great. We'll start with you, Suzanne.
Thanks, Moira. So I'll tell this story in a roundabout way, but in late 2015, I ended up in the emergency department in a hospital after having chest pain. So I was mid to late 30s, and it was due to a significant build-up of prolonged work stress. So lucky for me, it wasn't a heart attack, but that's what they thought when I was going in there, which was a bit of a shock. So, but prior to this event, for about, I think it's probably about 5 to 7 years, but prior to that, I'd presented at the GP for my usual checkups, or when I was feeling particularly run down and tired. So from, you know, my early 30s, really. Most of the questions that I had was about, you know, how much was I working? Was I eating properly? Did I smoke? How much alcohol did I consume? So all the normal sort of questions that would come up. The common response was, oh, we'll send you off for a blood test. We'll check your thyroid. We'll see if you've got a vitamin D deficiency, and we'll go from there. And usually nothing came back unusual from that. And they'd say, we'll have a couple of days off and get some, you know, R&R. But this led to a fair bit of frustration because, you know, how I was feeling from day to day in terms of being so tired really became normalised for me, even though I was just surviving throughout the day. So that's how it really felt when I was going through that diagnosis period. The ED doctor that I saw that day was a lovely man who took a lot of time to ask me some questions about my health and lifestyle and sleep patterns. This was really a life-changing moment for me because he felt around my neck and my chin and asked me if I snored. I said yes. So he suggested referral from my GP for a sleep study. So I did that, and I was referred to a respiratory specialist here in Adelaide. And he told me that I was grinding my teeth at night as well. So I had a bit of that going on, probably from the stress. So I had the sleep study, and I went back for the follow-up visit where he advised that I'd been diagnosed with moderate sleep apnea. I was waking up probably about 30 times an hour. So I wasn't getting enough sleep, and I was I was stopping breathing. So it was, I wasn't sleeping properly. I was told by the specialist that I needed to address the sleep apnea now. We won't worry about the restless leg syndrome because the sleep apnea will kill you. Well, they were his words, but the restless leg won't. So at that appointment, he said, you need to get a CPAP machine. So wear the mask and the machine at night, and basically that will fix it. And I wasn't given any other options. It was basically that, go off, get a trial, see you later. So I was never offered any contact, like a follow-up, come back and see me in 6 months' time, see how you're going. So I actually felt quite helpless and quite hopeless at that time, thinking, oh, well, I'm going to die of sleep apnea eventually, and there's nothing, there's no other options out there for me. But luckily for me, I saw an advertisement in the paper that was for the national trial to undertake some surgery, take my tonsils out, do some other, my tongue, and reposition my palate. So that worked, which has been fantastic and life-changing. However, my severe restless leg syndrome is worsening over time. So it's really now for me to go back and I know now to go back and see the doctor and say that that's starting to sort of get in the way. So that's where I went. So in summary, it took many, many years for that diagnosis to be made.
And it sounds like when the first physician said use CPAP, did that not work? Did you try it and you couldn't do it? Is that right? It didn't work for you?
That's right. So I tried for a couple of weeks with 3 different types of masks. And the main comment that the provider of those masks said that a lot of these masks are designed for men. So larger features and faces. So I could not get one that would fit my face properly.
Yeah, and no follow-up. Like, it was a shame it wasn't in a clinic that had, CPAP therapists and respiratory doctors all together. And it sounds like you felt like you were on your own. Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, thank you. So many years. Thanks you, Suzanne. We'll come back to you with our third question soon. Charlotte, tell us a bit the pathway to diagnosis, which has obviously been many, many years. We know that. Tell us a bit more.
I feel incredibly lucky and fortunate. I don't have much luck played a role. I feel that I have a very good GP, and because of my GP referring me to a sleep specialist.
Yeah, straight away, pretty much, as soon as you said,
well, that's the trigger that makes the difference. If the GP doesn't pick up on something and isn't referring you to a specialist, then that door is shut. As soon as I was referred to the sleep specialist, the incredible Dr. Cunnington in Melbourne, it all kind of fell into place and started to improve. So he referred me to have a sleep study done, diagnosed me with insomnia, and then explained to me that there were medical treatments available through medication, and that something could be done to help me, and that it wasn't just kind of okay to be suffering the way that I was. And then after going on to Daffodil for a while as a morning waking agent. It helped, and the Dr. Franklin felt that we could be doing better. Then moving on to dexamethasone and morning waking agent, which really helped. And I was a bit hesitant about, but I'm really glad that I did that. And then I was very unfortunate again that I was able to access Xyrem, which is a nighttime medication, which helps you get off to sleep and with the quality of your sleep, which then assists in your ability to wake after a normal amount of time. And so the combination of those two treatments has made a significant difference. In terms of the run up to get there, and that's not happening until I was early 30s. I think as a child and as a teenager, it was just dismissed as Charlotte not wanting to get out of bed in the morning. And then I remember, similar to Suzanne, I remember at university going to a doctor and saying, oh, maybe I need my iron levels checked or something because of my tiredness. And of course, everything was fine. And the doctor, I think, suggested that I get a better alarm clock. And then just really, they were just kind of thinking that there was nothing wrong and it was just me, and I just needed to do better. And
I think it was depression, or like we're thinking it was a mental health condition. Was that?
No one had ever.
They just thought you were a bit lazy.
Yeah, it was just something that I needed to tell my mind to do better. And not a lot of people like and so I just kind of accepted it as part of who I was, and I just had to get along with it until I was in Melbourne in my 30s trying to kind of tick off a few things on the list around my house and investigating things and trying to make things a bit better, and then this became
All right. Well, you're one of the lucky ones where it was a reasonably once you got to a really supportive GP, got to a sleep disorder specialist, got the diagnosis. Xyrem, we can probably I may come back to you when but obviously it's an expensive drug. Maybe it's not available to a lot of people. Because it's many thousands, isn't it, per year?
Yeah, many thousands.
And no public, no PB, no sort of rebate for you at the moment, nothing at all?
No, zero. It doesn't. So I think that is very
so I'm sure that'll come up in the third question perhaps. All right, thanks Charlotte. Caroline, can you tell us a bit more, tell us a bit about you? How does one get diagnosed with narcolepsy? What's the pathway?
I considered myself to have a really good GP as well, and like the girls, it was, get the iron test, your blood test rather, your thyroid and all that. I had already done all of that, and I did have already got thyroid issues and things like that. So we knew all that was under control. It was really not knowing where to go next, and the GP was basically saying, okay, we'll send you to a neurologist. And it wasn't a case that she didn't believe me. I never felt that I wasn't believed, and I was lucky in that nobody ever kind of was labeling me as being lazy and that, and I thank God for that. So, but the neurologist, sleep never came into the equation. It was all around whether do I have a brain tumor?
Yeah.
Do I have other neurological kind of issues that would be causing an obtrusion of sorts to, you know, to my sleep area, I guess.
Yeah. Because you were so tired, because they knew you were just so
yeah. And it was so unusual, like well, I believe it is anyway, at my age, to be sort of having these kind of issues.
Yeah, very late.
And also, whilst that was going on, I also went and I had my hearing checked, thinking there was an issue with balance, you know, and that kind of coincided with the neurologist's testing as well, thinking I'm going like this, I'm going off to sleep, that there is a balance issue. I don't know what, but there you go. It's just one of those things. And they all came back fine, absolutely fine. And I just had to do my own research in the end. And I found it. That's it. That's what I've got. And I went back to
Google, Dr. Google.
Google's great. It saved me. And I went to the GP and I said, I think I've got this. And she read it and she said, oh yeah. So she put me in to see a sleep specialist. Now the sleep specialist did the overnight study, and the next appointment I got the results, and there was nothing wrong with me. Yeah, there was a bit of restless leg. It's fine, nothing to worry about. I then found out that they're supposed to do the MSLT, the multiple sleep latency testing.
The next day. So stay the next day after the sleep study.
Yeah, so you can compare your daytime sleepiness against your nighttime sleepiness. And of course, they didn't do that. And this was like a really pretty, you know, good sleep place, right? So immediately I went back to the GP and I said, look, I didn't get this, I should have got this. So I went into another place, and sure enough, yep, I was definitely narcoleptic, and that started off the road to some element of recovery.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so the MSLT, the daytime sleepiness test, multiple sleep latency, putting people to have several naps across the day and see how sleepy you are. With left, you know, in a dark room, electrodes still on, see how sleepy you are. And the sleep the night before is to check that you have slept all night. Yeah. A lot of us, if we've stayed up all night, might look like we've got narcolepsy, like, so if you're really sleep deprived. Yeah. So they want to have the night before as well to check that you're not sleep deprived as well. So thank you very much. I wonder, just before we get just I suppose final question for all of you was to sort of, which I've, you know, briefed you all, what I'd love to know is particularly what you've been through and what you'd still go through. Start with Suzanne, of what might, from your point of view, might be better, how things could have be done better, what we could do to improve things, like for people coming up behind, you know, because there's going to be more and more people being diagnosed with these sleep disorders, and family worried about them, and health professionals worrying, thinking what's going on with this person. Any sort of suggestions, I guess, Suzanne, from your personal experience?
Yes, I've thought about this often. And that's why I'm so keen to be on the Consumer Reference Community Council as well. So I think there needs to be more awareness raised in the general public of the types of sleep disorders that we can experience and what the signs and symptoms of those are, and to look out for in our family and our friends and our partners. And so that could be through campaigns through multiple channels, I think, to reach the general population and make sure that it's in languages other than English as well.
Exactly.
Because
we need to work on that.
Oops, I've gone dark. Sorry. Sorry, the lights have gone off. It's making me go to sleep. I'll just lean forward a little bit. That was quite timely. some of the other things are, I think, some education for general practitioners about sleep disorder signs and symptoms, but who's at risk of developing those disorders, and to be very open-minded when somebody constantly presents with very nondescript concerns about tiredness, because I probably just did walk in there, go, oh, I just feel so tired all the time. But perhaps some other questions or a checklist about, well, do you snore, do you wake up with a sore throat, are you looking for sugar all day, those sorts of things could probably help, because the focus was really on, oh, you just work a lot and you travel a lot.
You've been burning the candle at both ends, hadn't you, as well?
I think some more research and to develop a range of treatments to cater for a range of personal circumstances. So I did mention, the CPAP for somebody such as myself who's got severe restless leg syndrome, who doesn't go to sleep early or soon after going to bed, can't cope with a mask on the whole time. It just actually compounds the problem as well. And I think just making people aware that, for those who actually do have a sleep disorder, is to follow up with a specialist if the treatment's not working, and make sure perhaps that specialists really understand the importance of giving that option to people and to follow up on a longer term regular basis, because your circumstances, I think do change.
Absolutely.
So essentially some research, some innovative solutions in consultation with people with those sleep disorders, raise the awareness, and of course this like consumer consultation is absolutely key.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Noted. Thank you. Thank you. Charlotte, what do you think?
Yeah, so as I said, once I was referred and I'm in care of Dr. Cunnington, I couldn't have wished for better help.
Yeah,
support,
a really great pathway.
I had the multi-layered sleep study, I should say. So I think it is just the identification to get the referral, and as Suzanne said, GPs being more alive to it and more ready to say, oh, maybe you should go and speak to a sleep specialist. So I think that is the main thing for me in terms of the pathway. And then, as we said, the treatment, there is an extremely effective treatment available, but unfortunately it is extremely expensive, and therefore not accessible to everyone, discriminates against those who can least afford to have it, and that's up to the federal government to do something about, which people like yourselves
we're onto it. The Australasian Sleep Association, Sleep Health Foundation, and I'm sure and other sleep associations are certainly aware of the need for access to better treatments, and more government support where we can. That's thank you. That's great. Thanks, Charlotte. Anything else? That's all from you.
Other than unfortunately it's a condition that just has a lot of stigma attached to it, and a lot of kind of social norms and social kind of preconceptions that make it very difficult to talk to people about your condition, because it is just so easily dismissed. And anything that can be done to change that would be great, but I can't see that happening anytime.
Well, I suppose part of this education awareness for the whole population is part of it, that's for sure, and really minding our language and our tone, and even the resources we put out, and how it's depicted in the media. That's
and having really supportive employers
that's right,
makes a huge difference as well.
exactly. It's really, yeah, so much we could talk about with all that, but yeah, thank you.
Mm.
Caroline, our final question to you is, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on,
And my mind just kind of explodes in all areas when I even just think about that one question, because it's astounding really how a GP would not consider sleep being an issue, that it might actually be something serious. It's just not at the forefront of their minds. And that tells me that even our GPs and potentially our other specialists are not aware of the severe impact that sleep has, the lack of sleep has on our bodies and our brains and our ability to function. It just doesn't seem to be there. Not obviously generally speaking.
Yeah.
Also, I find that those who have maybe been diagnosed, it's with a CPAP machine, that the more recent ones apparently can diagnose, but and things are moving on. I'm not too sure about that. I don't know why I went there, but it's not completing the diagnosis is what I wanted to say. Yeah, to not have had that MSLT really delayed my progression into finding a healthier, a healthier path. The other thing is, although everyone needs educating around healthy sleep habits and things like that, I don't think people are really aware of just how many sleep issues there are and what they entail and what they look like. So obviously, excuse me, the general public, but in particular teachers, they're with the kids every single day, and they're going to see kids failing and failing and failing, and it's perhaps not because they're stupid or they don't have that capability. Perhaps it's another thing, and the school counselors as well. I think educating key areas of people's lives. And I think that was, yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, that sort of reinforces what we know we need to do.
Yeah.
It's a matter of being able to get the resources and to do the education and to get the supports out there, which of course I mean there's the ASA underway at the moment is an enormous amount of work being planned for educating GPs, which is really important. Really, obviously it's come up, it's a really important part of it, and the specialists as well. So that's very, very helpful. It's just those few questions. There's so much, we could talk more. I'm sure. That's great. Sort of really just a summary synopsis of all three of you and the pathway that you've had. I wanted to open it up to our audience. We don't have the chat function, but we have the Q&A function for you to put any questions in. And I hope I'll make sure I can see it. At the moment, there's no questions there. But I'll keep an eye on that for anyone who wants to type in a question for any of our panelists tonight. And perhaps while we're waiting for that, I have plenty of questions, I guess. I probably should have said in the introduction to the audience, you three know who I am, but my background has been in, first of all, nursing, and then in sleep disorder as a psychologist, like treating sleep disorders, really, like at the coalface as a clinician. And I think that, and part of my work, I could work 7 days a week, all night, all day, and never really see everyone that needs to be seen. So that I realize that I have to, and plus it's actually really tiring after 30 something years of that clinical work, that I found I can only do part. I really liked about, say, 2 or 3 days of clinical work in the end, and the rest, so it was really hard to do more. But I wonder whether, like, one of the biggest things is that education around health professionals, for people to recognise. But even within that, even when you've got, say, a really experienced, fantastic health professional, what is it, I guess, what's the thing that helps the most, really, if you think about when you do find someone, then you think, wow, this is where it all turned. What is it? So what are the factors, I guess? Or maybe I'll start with Suzanne again. Maybe the qualities of a health professional from your point of view that have been helpful.
I suppose, so I reflect sometimes when I went into the ED that day with, you know, chest pains and walked out of there with a go and see your GP because with, you know, you need a sleep study. I think when I reflect back on that experience is that the doctor spent a lot of time listening to me and asking me questions. And so I go to the 5 whys. I don't know whether people are you know, familiar with that. They talk about diagnosing that in a business sense. That's where I'm used to it. But it just keeps, you know, keep asking why. Why do you think this? Why do you think that? Why is it then maybe that your sleep is still out, even though you've been trying to do all these other things? So one, I think it's really about listening and being really inquisitive and considering the person as a whole. I just feel like, as I've mentioned a couple of times here, it's been, you know, whilst I'm a fairly energetic person and was a very, very busy person doing lots of travel, and my sleep patterns are probably being interrupted by, you know, waking up in different time zones all the time. There was a lot of the time the questions, for example, at the GP, were about the present. So there was no sense of, well, what's been going on for you for a long time? How long has this been going on? So I think that'd be 2 things, really, that deep listening, digging a bit deeper into the responses that are given, and that the slice of time, it's like, I might have been presenting right then, but what is it that's been going on? Like what's under the iceberg?
Sorry, thank you. I'm muted. Thank you so much, Suzanne. That's exactly. I think you've nailed it. That the listening is really important for all of us. I mean, just active, proper, empathic listening is what's required, and that really good history taking and listening to not just what the presentation is. I've just noticed in the Q&A from Katie, who's a colleague of Charlotte's, and from the outside it appears she has a very good handle on managing work and her sleep disorder. But I'm curious to hear from everyone more about how they juggle sleep disorder and career and life, etc., and what that's like internally versus what you present to the world, which is a fantastic question, Katie. It really, that's a really important one. That's spot on. Charlotte, we'll start with you, since it's one of your lovely colleagues. I'll put you on the spot.
I'll just spell the illusion. This is something I was speaking to you, Dr. Cunningham, about. You have a very small bank of reserve of energy and where you can focus, and you this is obviously personally. I can only focus on like the most important areas for me, that is work. Because I have to pay my bills and
Pay for the Xyrem.
yeah, pay for the Xyrem. And what that means is that I can be, I guess, seen as not particularly affected by my sleep disorder at work. And I try not to talk about it, and I try not to have it as a thing at work. And I put lots and lots of effort and energy into work and being normal. But that means that there is very, very little left for outside of work. So the tiredness when I finished working at home and the needing to go to sleep as early as possible to try and get as much sleep as possible, and then the weekend comes and just sleeping through the entire weekend, waking up at like 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon and thinking, oh crap, it was a nice day outside and I missed it, and I should probably get up and go do something, but I don't really feel like it. And then on the Sunday trying to catch up with the list of chores that didn't get done during the week. So it's the outside of work that really suffers for me.
Yeah. So so everything goes into work, and then the rest of it's resting and recuperating to perform as well as you do at work, and
not being present for friends and
yeah,
not contacting people, not going out because I
Yeah.
just don't have enough.
and they understand. I mean, there must be some people too who don't know. There'd be several colleagues who don't know what you're dealing with. It's certainly these types of all sleep disorders generally. I remember clinically working with people, they often said, I wish I had like a neck brace or a wheelchair or something that people could understand. There was some kind of external symbol of my suffering or my disability or my debilitation rather than a disability. Because it's quite invisible, isn't it? It's something people look and sound well, and you're all, you're all employed. But it's the debilitation is hidden from everyone else. Carol-Ann, do you want to just comment on that question from Katie about how do you sort of juggle it, and what you present to the outside world compared to the internal struggle?
It's an excellent question, because it is very confusing for everyone else, because one day they might see me being my normal, go-getting, do this, do that, trying to get everything done and doing it well, to seeing me the next day just not even be able to finishing my sentences, trailing off. And they're thinking, what the hell's wrong with her? Like, or like that I'm upset with them or something like that. And this might just be people from, say, work, when I was working, or my family would know, obviously, but they forget, they just forget. And I've actually forgotten the question.
Yeah, that's all right. That's sort of
just
how that internal struggle and that you're answering it perfectly. How you present. People do forget because you probably present so well, and people forget that you actually are, having a significant neurological condition, or sleep disorder of narcolepsy.
And I do take my hat off to everyone who does manage to hold down a job, because who wants to employ a narcoleptic? Let's be honest about it. Somebody's going to keep falling asleep and being inconsistent in what they do. So it's a really tough gig to be able to hold down a job. So commend you, Charlotte and Suzanne.
It's extraordinary. It's all of you are doing a fabulous job, and those with sleep disorders who aren't able to hold down a job are still doing an enormous job, just coping with such it's extremely debilitating when you're not sleeping. And sleep is everything. It's a huge core pillar of health, and when it's disrupted, not getting enough, even this is like in hypersomnia, both of you would agree, you have a degree of insomnia as well, that you can't get quality sleep. You don't feel restored or refreshed. So I'm just mindful of the time too. Was there and there's no, I wanted to just see if there's any other final comments from anyone from the panel or from the audience. If there's any, I'm going to share a little thing as well for about our sorry, I got all the other, I'll share that in a different, share that in a different mode, excuse me. Anyway, I can't show it in a different mode. I'm just, what I want to do is just show you the ways of which you can connect with Sleep Health Foundation on this slide. If you can see it, still got my other things there. So we're on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. And if you wanted to hold your phone over the QR code that has our sign up, to go straight to our website, and there's a newsletter you can be part of. You can read more about what we're doing. we're very keen to increase our offerings and the resources that we have for the public about a range of things. We've got nearly 100 fact sheets there on a range of sleep topics across the lifespan, and whether it's sleep disorders or just general, you know, jet lag, sleeping in bushfire and in floods and in, you know, in disasters, those sorts of things, just general health sleep information. So probably at that point, I might just call the webinar to a close and just sincerely thank Suzanne and Charlotte and Carol Ann for your generosity, your time, your support of being, you know, being telling your story, so that we can have this resource. This will sit now on the website for people to be able to look up. We might be able to have snippets of, you know, this is what the symptoms are for narcolepsy, etc. And we can make a, you know, at very low cost for us, because we can't do fancy videos and things yet, but, you know, of people telling their stories. So it's been really, really incredibly, we really appreciate it. So round of applause if we can for you all. And I think I'll just, yeah, I'll call it to a close if anyone else hasn't got, I think that we're all okay with that. So yeah, so thank you all very much, and thanks so much for the audience for coming along tonight.
Moira, well done, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.